So good morning again, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Powering Up Main Street, What You Need to Know About EV Charging. My name is Savannah Blance Maria. I am the Programs Coordinator here at Connecticut Main Street Center. In a moment, I will introduce today's guest speaker, but first, just a few words. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. We are grateful to our sponsors and funding partners that make this work possible. Connecticut Main Street Center's founding sponsors are Eversource in the state of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Additional funding comes from Webster Bank, Travelers, and Liberty Bank. We all know a great downtown when we're in it. It's a feeling, an energy that we can sense, see, and experience, but it can be hard to articulate what makes a main street great. So we've broken it down into 6 qualities that make it easier to grasp. There is always dedicated Main Street management. The Main Street is connected by multiple modes of transportation for people to access. It's welcoming, friendly, and inclusive. Sustainable practices are in place that bring life and vibrancy for today and for the future. Small businesses are supported and encouraged, as well as residential and commercial development. And there is a unique sense of place. And with that, I am very excited to introduce our guest speaker, Edward Gilchrist, founder and principal engineer at Gyre 9. I'll hand it over to you now, Ed.
Thanks. So I have to sharing. Give me a sec. Share. All right. Savannah, can you see that? Does that work out?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, good.
Oh,
hi,
Ed,
thanks, guys.
You'll probably want to expand your screen.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So yes, as Savannah said, I'm Ed Gilchrist, the president, owner of Gyre 9, and also president of G9EV, their sister companies. Gyre 9 is let me skip down a little bit. Gyre 9 is a product development company and contract manufacturer. G9EV is an EV charger company. We sell our own chargers. We also design and manufacture chargers for other companies under their brands. Go backwards for a second. I spent a number of years, a decade at Hamilton Standard in the aerospace industry, and then had another design and development firm previously that did medical products. This company is now 20 years old, and we've been designing many different products, but have a specialty in power products such as EV chargers and other things like that. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to go back to the list. That's what I want to do. So we're going to go over some things. We're going to talk about who we are, which I just did, what the EV charger market is, some terminology, since it gets confusing if you're not in the business, to understand some of the terms that are used. We'll talk a little bit about electric vehicles, obviously talk about, and this is the last time you'll see this on here, but about EVSEs. And EVSEs are really EV chargers. The common term is EV charger, but it stands for, EVSE stands for electric vehicle supply equipment. We'll talk a little bit about the vehicle side of charging, and then a little quick thing about home versus commercial EV chargers, what the difference is and why you wouldn't put home chargers out in a commercial environment. A little bit about charge station management systems that are the cloud side of the payment system for charging and control of it. And then a few other topics and a little bit of Q&A. Kind of some first things. I get stopped a lot, with people asking about, an EV, and the first thing they'll say is, how many miles can I go on a charge? And then where do I, how do I charge it and where do I charge it? And these are questions that sometimes are a block for people even considering EVs. But I'll say, despite that, the market is growing in both EVs and EV chargers. But I will say that the number of EVs in the US is growing much faster than the number of chargers. So one of the things that has to happen if we want more EVs out in the world, we need to put more EV chargers in place. Because if you look at this or projections, and there's lots of projections out there, you can see out in 2030, 25 million EVs. And the number of chargers, I'm going to switch to another thing, a little simpler chart. This is the rate at which we're getting public EV charging stations, and this is the rate that EVs are out in the world. So it's we have to play a little catch up, all of us. Again, another chart about where the world thinks we need to be in 2030 for chargers. The majority of chargers, we're talking about level 2 chargers. DC fast chargers will always be a small quantity because you won't need those as much, given you'll have charger at your house or at work. But the majority of chargers will be in homes or in apartment buildings down the road. But we're going to need a fair amount of public DC fast, but primarily level 2 chargers. And we'll get into that a little bit more in these slides. Right now in the US, there's about 4.5 million EVs and less than 200,000 public charging stations. In Connecticut, there's about 68,000 electric vehicles and about 1,500 public charging stations. In Southbury, where our factory is, there's, let's say, 400 EVs and only something like 10 to 12 public chargers, mostly associated with some restaurants here that are available. One of the things that is different in the internal combustion engine world versus electric vehicles is the great thing about EVs is there's electricity everywhere. So we can offer charging in places you could never put a gas station. So unlike gas stations, it's a lot less costly to put an EV charger in. If it's a level 2 charger, it's maybe a few $1,000s for a charger and a little bit for an electrician to come in, versus a gas station that can cost, $500,000 to $5 million to put a gas station in somewhere. So they should be more ubiquitous in general. For anybody, whether it's a business or a municipality, well, why should we put EV chargers in? One, it's an attraction to bring people who have EVs to your location. So a good example of early adopters in this market were hotels. If you are going to stay at a hotel and you're driving an electric vehicle, if the hotel doesn't have an EV charger, you're not going to stay there. So you're going to skip to a hotel that does have one. If you're a downtown and you have no EV chargers available, they might not come to your location. They might decide they're going to go shopping somewhere else. Another reason to put them in is because they can be revenue generators. And I did a really kind of some simple math here. If you took an EV charger or a charger port, because generally a lot of chargers have 2 ports, but if you had 2 electric vehicles visit per day, and you charged an upcharge of like 15 cents per kilowatt hour above your electricity costs, and they charge X percentage, maybe 60% charge on their car they add, that works out to be about $400 a month per port. So if you had 20 to 30 ports in your downtown, that can add up to quite a bit. Now you could decide to charge nothing for charging, but if it financially was more interesting to be able to be a revenue generator, it can be quite a revenue generator. The other thing is, obviously, if you have sustainability targets or goals, bringing more low emissions or no emissions vehicles into your town is certainly helps you get towards your goal. questions come up about, well, who do you deal with in a municipality, particularly who buys these or who manages these things? It varies, and I'm just going to hit a few things that I know, and I'm not the expert at this necessarily. Um, but in New Haven, for instance, we have a contract with their parking authority, and the parking authority manages the getting the chargers installed, and certainly puts out the uh, the purchase orders to get them into New Haven. In Fairfield, we worked with the Public Works Department and their building manager to get chargers in place. It really depends on the town and what their organization looks like. When I mentioned things like what can you charge for charging, generally anywhere from zero, if you want to give it away for free, if that makes sense, to incentivize people to come into your town or your facility. Um, to, I can say 60 cents per kilowatt hour. I would say that's the extreme end for a level 2 charger, but anywhere in between. And of course, Connecticut has really high energy prices. So if you want to have it be a neutral or a moneymaker, you have to be careful with not charging too little. A little bit about terminology. Okay. I'm going to try to skip through this as quick as I can. And I realize I'm an electrical engineer and I'm trying to explain some of this stuff, but there's a lot of confusion always when stuff's talked about. So I'm going to whip through this, and certainly, hopefully it helps some of you that might not understand. So a little bit of electrical, voltage. We're all used to our 110, 120 volt outlet in our house. Typically, these level 2 chargers run off 240 volts, which similar to what your dryer plugs into at your house if it's an electric dryer. And then DC fast chargers will run at 480 volts and three-phase, much bigger installation costs. So for downtowns and most of the municipality stuff, we're talking about level 2 charging. Uh, Amps, people talk about amps. That's just, how much, you have a certain voltage, and it's, how much current you're drawing from the power lines. Um, Typically, when we're talking about chargers, there's things about power that are talked about. So when somebody says, hey, this charger has, 11 kilowatts, you can see how that's calculated. The big DC fast chargers can be up to 300 or 400 kilowatts. Typical level 2 chargers are in the generally 11 max. They max out at like 18, 19 kilowatts. And then there's energy, and that's the equivalent to like gallons of gasoline. So energy is, hey, if I'm charging the vehicle, it's how much power we're putting in times time. So it's like the volume of energy we're putting into the car. I already explained about what an EVSE is. It's commonly called an EV charger. And in our electrical engineering world, I'll explain later, but a lot of the charging is actually managed by the car, not by the charger. There's a myriad of connectors out in the world, but I'm only focusing on the US here. Previously, the one you'll see the most is a J1772 connector. That's typical of almost all the vehicles outside of a Tesla. Tesla has its own connector that they standardize on. But I'm going to say most of the car companies are moving away from this J1772 and are converting to an NACS, or a National American Charging Standard connector. That's going to be happening over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. Most of the car companies are adapting to this. And the reason being is it's a much more elegant solution. It'll also give you access to all the Tesla superchargers that are out on the planet. In the case of a J1772, if you're DC fast charging, it becomes this double connector here, and it's a very large and elegant connector. So it makes a lot of sense to go to this Tesla thing. And some cars, very few, have this CHAdeMO connector, which was Nissan Leafs and Mitsubishi Outlanders. Those are kind of going extinct, but those still exist. There's a thing called plug and charge. You might hear about that. Certainly Tesla was the early adopter of that, where once you sign up, you just plug your car in and the charger talks to the car and knows it's you, and you can just walk away. You don't have to do anything. No app, no nothing. That's starting to happen with the cars, the newer cars that exist, and the newer chargers are starting to incorporate plug and charge. And all it is a more sophisticated communication between the car and the charger. Quickly, there's terminology of you can see here, it's vehicle to load, vehicle to home, vehicle to the grid. That's where eventually, again, this is really early, where cars will be able to, you'll be able to power your house off your car, or there might be an interaction between the grid and your car in a way where they're going to, the utilities will incentivize that so that if they have high demand, they can pull energy off the car or put it back into the car. That's generally coming. It's only exists in a very narrow segment currently. Tap to pay is just, walk up and it's got a payment system and you can use your credit card and tap to pay. Some chargers have it, some chargers don't. NFC is very similar, but that includes sometimes where you can use your Apple Pay off your phone and charge your car. In some circumstances, RFID readers are on chargers where you'll get a particular card from, could be your employer or whatever, where you have access and you just swipe your RFID. And then lastly, Energy Star rating in the US is important. And certainly the utilities in many cases are not interested in approving any chargers on their rebate programs if it doesn't have Energy Star. A little bit about electric vehicles. Figured I'd start with that, get you a little understanding of the different kind of electric vehicles. The big play and certainly Teslas are all battery electric vehicles, BEVs, and most of the electric vehicles that are coming out are battery electric vehicles. However, everybody's certainly heard the hybrid electric vehicles exist, and in those cases, most of them are you fill up with gas, the engine both charges the battery and both the gas and electric motor is on the drivetrain, so it can run off either or both. There's plug-in hybrid electric vehicles where the battery is charged by an EV charger and the car runs off both the gas and electric motor. And then there's extended range electric vehicles, which you'll start seeing more of these. The Chevy Volt was one of those. They're not making that anymore, but there's a bunch of pickup trucks. I think the Dodge Ram Charger is a EREV, where it only has electric motor drive, and the battery can be plug-in charged, but also has an onboard gas generator to extend the range. So if you're in a location where there's no chargers, you can be filling up the generator to have it charge the battery. The types of EV charging, level 1 is you basically plug into your home outlet. You don't get a lot of, it's a very slow charging. You get, so I put 2 to 5 here, but it's probably more like 2 to 3 miles of range per hour. So, if you have a 300-mile range on your car and you were completely empty, it would take a long time, take 100 hours to charge your car. But in many cases, that works if you're only going 20 miles a day and you plug into an outlet at night, and it's a totally portable charger that almost every car that EV you buy, it'll come with that. But also almost any EV you buy with the charger that comes with it can also do level 2 charging. Level 2 charging runs off 240 volts, and typically the range that or the the charging speed you get is somewhere in the 10 to 30 miles an hour. In some cases, you can get up to 60 miles an hour. Certain cars can be charged that fast. Uh, and then people will call it level 3, but it's really DC fast charging, which runs off 480 volts. And that's where um, you get to the place where you can charge your car in 15 minutes. And that will generally be in highway, off-highway locations, because if you look all the way to the right, you can see the cost, right? A level 1 charger, you can probably even get it for less than $300. Generally, it can cost nothing to install because you just plug it into an outlet. A level 2 charger, per port, per plug that you're going to plug into a car, can be anywhere from, I don't know, 1,500 to maybe $4,000 or $5,000 per port. But you are going to have to potentially spend money to install it, unless you have, if it was home, unless you have a outlet you can plug into. But if it's at a facility somewhere, you're going to have to bring power to it. And usually you're never going to do one, you're going to do multiples, which will, the cost per port will be certainly less the more you put in a location. But a DC fast charger, a very low end DC fast charger, which falls into closer to a level 2 charge rate, might be $10,000, but you can spend well over $200,000 per port for the fastest, biggest DC fast chargers. Plus, you have to bring power now. Now you have to bring 480 volts, which isn't sitting out on the power line. You're basically pulling something in from a substation. So you could spend up to $350,000 per port just bringing the power in. So that's generally why you only see them, one, in very near highway locations and also in large quantity. If you look at a Tesla installation, you'll have 10 to 20 Tesla chargers all on a line, because that they have to bring power in. They want to do it for multiple chargers all at once. So I mentioned this earlier, but EV charging is an interesting thing to talk about, because in a way, chargers just provide power to the car, but the car itself understands the battery chemistry. So the car is controlling how fast and the profile of the charging. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just being an engineer here when I'm talking about it. But typically, so level 2, you get power to AC power to the charger. The charger provides AC power to the car. The car then converts the AC to DC, and then it manages the charging of the battery. In a DC fast charger, you cut out that intermediate AC to DC conversion, and you're basically putting the power direct onto the battery pack, and the car is still managing the charge rate, but the car does it via discussions with the charger and back and forth, and it controls the flow of the energy to that battery. And by doing that, they can run it at a much, much higher power rate, because they don't have to convert. There's no conversion. A little bit on home chargers versus commercial chargers. Home chargers can be super simple. You have it hooked up to an outlet or to a directly connected to a breaker, and you plug it into your car and it does its thing. Some of them have apps so you can see what's going on. Some of them will be connected to the cloud. That allows utilities to control during peak demand, to throttle it down. And if you were doing home chargers, again, this isn't the focus of this group, and you wanted to get energy discounts, they're generally going to want to have you buy one that has this back end connection, so that the utility can control that. Commercial charging is all that plus more. Commercial charging, look, in that case, in the commercial charging world, you're generally having to have all revenue grade equipment so you can monitor the power usage. You can bill for that power usage or not, but you can also authorize it. So you might be in a situation where it's a public charger or not, but if it's a public charger where certain people get certain discounts, certain people get certain rates, you have a lot of options there. So there's, again, this revenue grade stuff going on. The chargers are generally built much tougher than home chargers, because home chargers might sit in your garage. Commercial chargers are sitting out in the worst environment. There's nobody watching them. So they have to, somebody goes up and hits it with a baseball bat or whatever. You don't want it to fall apart. Typically for a commercial charger, there'll be an app on your phone. There'll be a QR code. You scan the QR code, authorize it through your app, and you're good to go. Usually the chargers, pretty much 95% of them in commercial charging have cell connectivity. So it gets to the cloud that way. That gets to your app. That gives you allows you to authorize it. We talked about earlier, some of them have RFID readers. Some of them have cable management systems that keep the cables off the ground. So unlike the air pump for your tires when you go to the gas station, all the stuff's laying on the ground because nobody ever puts it back. A good cable management system retracts it back so that you're not driving over those cables all the time. A lot of them will have credit card readers, plug and charge we discussed. Some of them have screens. A little bit about the back end. So the cloud side of things, so you have this charger, but in a commercial situation, in order to authorize it, in order for it to have billing to pay for the charge, you have to have a cloud backend, and those are called charge station management systems or CSMS. There's many, many, many different providers. So for instance, and I'll use us for example, what we do, we're somewhat agnostic. Our customers can pick backend providers, CSMSs of their choice, and we'll be able to communicate with them. Some of them are closed systems. So companies like ChargePoint, they're kind of, we'll say the AOL equivalent of they make a charger, they make the back end, and it's a closed system that has certain advantages that they manage the whole thing. But the flip side is doesn't give you much option as far as having other protocol providers, other CSMSs. So there's a number of, I just listed a few of the open protocol CSMSs. And when I say open protocol, there's a standard. It's called OCPP, which is Open Charge Point Protocol. It's basically a language that the chargers talk to the cloud in, and it's all predefined. They all use the same language, so we can communicate in chargers we make and in other companies who make their chargers. We can converse through that OCPP to authorize charging, monitor the charger, do the billing, do software updates through OCPP interfaces. I'm just showing you an example of a CSMS. So the companies who make the chargers, right? And I'll again use us. We get paid for the charger, right? It gets bought, we deliver it. Generally, at that point, we're mostly done unless we get some maintenance contract or other. At that point, it gets handed you or whoever in your organization would be dealing with a CSMS. And they will give you all the software so you can monitor all your stations and do all of the accounting and control of all the chargers for you. And to do that, they charge a fee. There's different CSMSs charge different amounts of money. I'm giving you an example of one, Ready, that we work with. They give you two choices. They give you one where you pay a certain amount per month per port, flat fee, or they take a cut of they charge based on so much per kilowatt hour sold. So you have two choices, and in some cases, the per kilowatt hour is really useful, especially if you're not sure whether you're going to get enough EVs coming to that station, and the math works, and you can always move over back and forth between these two systems. But every CMS has different pricing categories and different tiers of pricing. So, I would say either shop around, or if somebody was buying a charger from us, we'd say, well, here's a few choices you have. And we would certainly talk to you about what the best solutions would be. A few other quick topics. When you're doing large installations, you're going to put 10, 20, 30 chargers in. Some of the concern can be that you're going to overload the power available locally to those. So the backend CSMSs will generally help you manage that. So we can do power management. So if we had, 20 chargers in a location and everybody plugged in at once, wow, that's going to be, hundreds of thousands of, 300 kilowatts coming out of our grid, and that's unmanageable locally. They can coordinate to either lower all the charging rates for all those cars, or vary the charging rates to the cars. Also, in some cases, if it makes sense, where you're plugged in overnight, if it's a resident area, or if you're in a city and you're allowing people who live in the city to use these chargers, that's going to be overnight, you can coordinate it so it charges at an optimum time of night where the power rates are lower. There's some other kind of charging examples. There's the few companies who make these smart sockets where they're just providing AC power, but they also have revenue grade metering on it. So you would bring your own charger, one of those portable chargers, and you plug in. So sometimes these make sense in apartment buildings where they want the cheapest access to the ability to charge, but they themselves don't charge. They're just a power meter, basically. And then there are one other kind of charger that actually we designed and manufacture are for urban environments where people don't want any cables lying around. And in these situations, the EV owner would have their own cable that could then plug into a charger outlet that's on curbside. So you'll start seeing more and more of these in the market for urban environments. And then there's utilities. A lot of the utilities around the country offer a lot of incentives to put EV chargers in, both to cover the cost of the EV charger, but also the installation. EverSource, I'd say, was front and center on a lot of this, around the country. In Connecticut, they've been really, really generous. We can get more information on this, but I'll give you some quickie stuff. If you went to the EverSource site and looked up EV charging, they have a really good frequently asked question area. They have the rebate program for both home and commercial charging, where you can get applications that you can fill in. In many cases, you might be working with an intermediary. So if you're working with a ESCO, energy service company, or installers, they can help you make the right decisions about, one, filling in all this stuff, but also looking at the way to get maximum return or maximum rebate. So really quickly, if you were doing stuff in an underserved community, the rebates, and by the way, these can change, but this is kind of latest that we know, up to $40,000 per site for the installation. Plus they'll also pay a portion of the EV charger cost. And I'm just going to say what happens is, and it's $20,000 for level 2 if you're not in an underserved community, but that's per site. So you might actually at a location have multiple sites. So you might break it up so you get maximum rebates instead of putting 5 or 10 chargers in one location. You break it up into multiple locations, and you'll get multiple rebates. Some questions that came before the webinar. Let's see if I answered most of these. Biggest challenge is integrating EV parking into existing parking infrastructure and how to deal with public discourse. Okay, I'm not a politician, so I'm going to avoid some of that discourse question. But I think it's very interesting because when you set up EV charging and parking infrastructure, you have a lot of choices in how you do it. You can set these payment terms up where there's charging for payment for charging. That can convert into payment. If you're finished charging, it can be either a penalty for hanging in that space or just a parking fee after that by the hour. So I think um, there are people smarter than me that are dealing with this. And so, where we're dealing with New Haven Parking Authority, they seem to have it figured out. But there are other people in my team that have more information, whether it's, Andy or Frank or Lori. So, questions on the rebates. I think go to Eversource. There's lots of information, but it's if if you if you want more hands off on that, you can work with something like an ESCO where they'll come in, they'll do a site survey, fill all the paperwork in, and they make some money, obviously to be in the middle of it, but they're very helpful. And we work with a bunch of ESCOs to for some of our installations. Status of state incentives for EV charging. I'm going to say it changes. Eversource paused for a bit when there was issues between them and Pura, and it paused. Generally, the trick is get your applications in, and then potentially you might wait to put them in until the applications are approved, but get in line. Most of the situations, certainly for municipalities, I don't think you would be turned away. How many customers require financing? Not my area, so I'm going to try to not answer questions I'm not knowledgeable about. And then which products are they using? That's sort of a great question of like, well, chargers, obviously, and certainly most people putting chargers in are level 2 chargers. I think the first thing you want to do if you want state incentives is go on and look at the list of approved chargers. I'm trying to be agnostic. Obviously, I'd love you to use our chargers, but you'll see Eversource has all the approved chargers are on a list on the Eversource site. Software per payment, we talked about that. That's CSMS payment, and that's generally through an app. Many versions of that. Do municipalities allow downtown property owners to install EV chargers on sidewalks adjacent to their property? Interesting question. And I'm going to say let me back up. I showed this, and in these cases, with this particular product, its whole method is to be curbside and connect to power at the residence or business that's sitting at that location in the city. Instead of connecting to city power, they're connecting to the residence power. So that happens. I think it's probably from town to town, and it varies. Okay. Savannah, I ran through as fast as I could, so we leave time for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. We did have a few questions come in. You've touched on some of this, but maybe you could go into a little bit
Sure.
more depth on these topics. What are the average ongoing maintenance? I'm sorry, my question got away from me. What are the average ongoing maintenance and operating expenses and time that should be budgeted per public charger if chargers are owned by the municipality?
Yeah, good question. I think that I'm gonna click down here. Buy chargers that are going to last, because at the same time, I'm going to tell you that there's a broad difference between, chargers, and they are in a tough environment. So the reality is do your homework on that. Pick a really reliable, solid charger instead of the little plastic thing that somebody's going to hit with a baseball bat and it's gone. There should be literally no maintenance other than, checking to make sure that the cable is not cut or anything like that. Because of the way chargers are, we're always in communication with them. So even though you might be dealing with that CSMS, the payment system people, we're in communication with them. So if there's an issue, they see it before you even know. Like there was a problem. They'll try to fix it themselves if they can through a software update or something. But if there's a problem, then we get a ticket. We get something in our system that says there's a charger that has an issue. We'll go online, look, and try to manage that. Obviously, if it's in um, for us, again, I'm speaking about us. If it's within warranty, we'll work with the property owner to take care of it. Um, if it's not, there'll be some charge to fix it. If it's something where it was just, somebody hit it with a snowplow, well, we'll still help you fix it, but it's obviously going to be a cost. So ongoing, if you think about it in the near term, um, it should be, if you said, from 0 to 5 years, there should be little to no expense to manage these things, unless, again, people are really abusing them. And then after that, it becomes a question of, is it time to upgrade? Because the technology every 5 years here is moving so fast. There might be, don't assume they'll be there forever. The advantage, though, is once you've put one in, you have power at that location. It's already brought up, so it can be something where to pull an old one out, or in our case, we can upgrade the products, you know, keep that product in place and we'll send you upgrades. But if it needs an upgrade, you can pull it out and wire a new one in fairly low cost. Hopefully that answered it.
Yes, I think that definitely helps. We have plenty of municipal members, so very helpful to them. Another question that we have is, with the loss of federal tax incentive on EV purchases, are the projections of EVs expected to be on the road still accurate?
Um, I'm going to say this. No one knows. They've always been wrong, right? They underestimated before and then they overestimate. First of all, the market's going to continue to grow. One of the things to think about is lifespan of EVs versus ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles. An electric vehicle and the technology where we're at now, battery packs on a good electric vehicle can last 200 to 300,000 miles. I don't know how many of you out there have had a vehicle 300,000 miles, but the reality is there's very little things to break in an EV. So as we move forward, expect that as EV sales keep growing, those EVs aren't going away. So the percentage of the market will grow at a higher rate than it would be for an internal combustion engine, because generally at a couple 100,000 miles, typically those are gone. They're in the junkyard, they're getting torn apart. EVs, um, the motor in an EV can last 1 million miles, the electric motor. So I think, yes, it's not going to grow, given certainly where we are in the political environment, aren't going to grow necessarily at the rate that some places projected. And even the projection I showed you is a year old. But it's still growing.
Thank you. I think that helps answer that question. Another question, can assessors assess these as personal property to businesses or apartment owners?
Ooh, I'm not a tax lawyer. Well, honestly, if you put a charger in, you own it. Again, you can work different deals, right? You can do a deal where you don't own the charger, that you are, in some cases, and I'm not going to even talk about us per se, but there could be situations where you go, I'm just giving you the space, right? I'm allowing you to get the space, and you're going to reimburse me for the electricity that's used, but I don't want to know nothing. And deals are done like that, whether it's us or other companies, where the chargers get put in place, and you're providing the space and they're providing the chargers. So that's done. In the case of Tesla, use them as an example many, many, many times, where they bring the stuff in, and the location provides the space, but Tesla doesn't sell the chargers to the place. So it's kind of depends on what you want. But if you certainly buy it and you own it, it's part of your stuff. You're going to get taxed on it.
Sure, got you. That might be a best question for the assessor in that municipality. Another
Correct.
question, Can solar power any EV chargers?
Yep, sure. Um, but to give you an idea, we've dealt with some of these solar companies where what they'll do is they'll put in a canopy, right, and of certain size with a most cases a battery storage system, and then you run the charger off that system. Uh, it's it tends to make the charging longer, right? Where let's say a canopy is, 10 feet wide, 20 feet long or something, with a battery pack, but you might still, given that area, you might only be able to charge at 5 kilowatts charge rate because that's all the sun that's coming in. But absolutely, you can run off solar, and it's done all the time.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I've seen that myself, just being around Connecticut. I've definitely seen solar panels on the chargers. So that's a great sustainability effort for your downtowns and main streets. Right now, I'm going to invite anyone to submit any final questions. I don't see anything else coming through right now. So while we wait for any potential last questions, Ed, did you have any final remarks or closing thoughts for our
Well,
audience today?
I'm gonna say this when I get in conversations with people about chargers, I'm gonna say I can be fairly agnostic. I'm not gonna. It's not a religion for me. I'm an electrical engineer. EVs make a lot of sense. They don't make sense for everybody in every situation. Maybe eventually they will, depending on how battery chemistry and battery density grows. But the reality is, if you've never driven one, try it. Um, and if the some of the drawbacks of an EV, which might be, you know, having to pay a little more attention to where you're going to charge, aren't an issue. It's fairly significant in so many ways. The performance of EVs are amazing. They're quiet, they're clean. So but I'm not saying it as it is the only answer. I own a lot of gas vehicles, so I'm on both sides of the fence. Uh, but it is changing. It's a rapidly moving market. But I would also say that probably our team and other teams can't express enough how important it is to try to put enough chargers around so that it it doesn't become the question of why somebody should have an EV or not, and why um, uh, they should pick your location versus somewhere else. Just make sure there's enough, and people will generally underestimate how much they need. They'll say, "Well, we haven't seen any EVs," and you go, "No, because no, you don't have any chargers." And then you put two chargers in, and next thing you know, they're loaded up all the time. So. Uh, but that's where you can come and get an assessment, whether it's, in our case, we can help you with that, but you can bring people in to do a pretty thorough assessment of what the numbers are. And I'm going to say my team gave me a whole bunch of stuff before this meeting where uh, we can get you data of, hey, how many EVs are in my location? We can get that data. How many chargers should we have in our town or in our municipality based on that? And again, I'm going to say they're agnostic. They're just math questions, and the data, the the census and all of the data that we have can tell you exactly how many you should have. I'm not saying we're unique to that. I'm not selling us. It's just don't think you're alone in this. And there are lots of help to make those assessments.
Sure. We did get another question. It says, have you worked with developers to install level 2 chargers for apartments? How does the rebate work?
Um, yes. Um, the in this case, again, everyone's different, but I think the trick always is you do the site analysis with the property owner, then bring it to Eversource, fill out all the forms, whether again you're using an intermediary like a ESCO or you're just going to go direct, or your electrician or your installer can work that for you. And then I'm not going to say it happens quickly because it has to go through a process and how much they're willing to authorize. But um, yeah, it's not as intimidating as it might seem. You know, the first thing to do is apply, and then you go, oh, that was easy, and I got it, and great. If you didn't get it, there'll be reasons why, and you might have to adjust your application.
Okay. I think that definitely answers that question. And that's something we're seeing more and more about is development, EV chargers, making sure those new development projects have the adequate chargers that they might need for the community. At this time, it doesn't look like there's any further questions. So just a thank you to you, Ed, a thank you to the Gyre 9 team. For our members and anyone watching today in our audience, just a reminder that Gyre 9 is part of our professional affiliate network here at Connecticut Main Street Center. So do feel free to visit our website on our professional affiliates page, where you can check out more information about
And
all of our professional affiliates like Ed and Gyre 9.
And I'm going to get yelled at if I don't say this. Look, we're in Southbury, Connecticut. Our factory's in Southbury, Connecticut. Anybody who's on this call, if you would like to tour the factory and see what we do and get into a deeper conversation with us, you're more than welcome. And Savannah can, however you do it, you can
Yes, I
hook
can
those people
connect.
up, and Lori and my team can manage that. And we would love to see anybody who's interested to know more and see what we do here in Connecticut. We welcome you.
Yeah, I know the staff that visited from Connecticut Main Street Center, they had a great time, and we're very grateful for that tour. So
Yeah.
with that being said, everyone, please take a look at the evaluation that I chatted out, and now we will move forward to some closing remarks. Thanks again, everybody. We invite you to join the more than 100 communities around the state committed to improving their Main Street by becoming a member of Connecticut Main Street Center. Some of our upcoming events, they're pretty exciting. So we'll have Spotlight on Main. Our community will be Thomaston. We invite you to join us there on September 4th. It'll be from 3 to 6 p.m. You can register now at ctmainstreet.org/events. We're also gearing up for our third cohort of Main Street Accelerator. This program could be an excellent next step once you have your formal downtown steering committee in place. Please join us on September 18th for a virtual information session on our leadership development program dedicated to downtowns and Main Street management projects. Register now at ctmainstreet.org/events. We're also very excited to have a two-part series of a placemaking webinar. So placemaking, the essentials of public murals, part 1, purpose, planning, and process. That'll be held on September 23rd from 11 a.m. to 12 noon. You can register at our events page on our website. And then part 2 will be held on September 30th from 11 a.m. to 12 noon, where we'll be focusing on the essentials of public murals, storytelling, leveraging, and impact. And that's also open for registration on our events page. Once again, we thank our sponsors and program partners. Also, another thank you to Gyre 9. When you exit this webinar, you should be prompted to complete an evaluation for this presentation. Please take a moment to share your thoughts as it helps us shape our programming so it is most valuable to you. That concludes today's webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.